be joined by Cassandra Hemingway, who many of you know. Really excited to have this program. It's been a challenging news environment in recent years, and we've been fortunate to have with this new service that's very innovative that Richard has founded. We've got a different, more vibrant news environment than many places. So Richard Watts is a former journalist and political campaign manager and the founder of VM's Community News Service, which is a statewide multi-outlet academic news partnership with a mission to provide content to community news outlets and give students applied learning experiences. Richard has a master's degree in journalism from the SI Newhouse School and a PhD related to media studies from the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources. And then he's also going to be joined by Cassandra Hemingway, who many of you know, as the editor-in-chief of Montpelier's newspaper, The Bridge, and has been reporting the news in Vermont since 1994. She has a master's in print journalism from Boston University and a bachelor's degree from Smith College. She has raised 3 kids in central Vermont and is the person of Montpelier's famous news hound, Jasper the Friendly Gold. All right.
Thank you, Anne. Can you all hear me okay? Is that good? A little closer? Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Great to be here in Montpelier. Amazing. I'm going to be somewhat brief, and then Cassandra's going to talk a little bit about from her experience, and then open it up to any questions or thoughts or comments you all have. I'm sure you think about all this a lot. Okay, so just to back up for a minute. Local news is in a crisis. Lots and lots of research shows what has been happening, and the basic business model in some ways has evaporated because Google and Facebook have taken a lot of the advertising, and Craigslist, a lot of the advertising dollars. And for a variety of reasons, local news didn't adapt fast enough. And now in this country, according to research by folks at Northwestern, almost 80 million Americans live in what they call news deserts. So, and these are places that have 0 or 1 newspaper outlet. That's what the definition of a news desert is. That actually doesn't really paint the full picture, because you may be in a place like, Burlington that is not a news outlet, and Burlington does have 7 days, but of course the free press is nothing like it once was. Or you could be in a city like Houston that is not a news desert, but all sorts of parts of the city are undercovered. So however you define it, there's much less local news happening. There's a number of reporters is far less. The funding and resources for local news is far less. So why does that matter? I mean, obviously, intuitively, we know why it matters, but all this research shows a variety of things that are happening when you don't have local news. First of all, people are less likely to engage in their communities because they don't know what's going on. People are less likely to participate in elections when there's not a robust local news. There are less likely to be contested elections. There's less likely to be, one of the basic functions of the news media is holding our government officials accountable. There's studies that show when there's no local news, there's more corruption and graft. And I'm talking totally here, I'm focused on the local and the hyper-local. So we can talk about national news, the New York Times, et cetera, but I'm talking about what's happening right here in our communities, the Times Argus or the Bridge, here in Montpelier. So without a source of local news, people are less likely to know what's going on, so they're less engaged in their community. The other thing that's happening is that without robust local news, people are turning to national news sources that are ideological. So you have basically competing news bubbles, and that leads to increased polarization less trust in institutions, and basically undercuts a lot of the things we care about in a democracy. You can tie it all back to local news. It really, really matters. And a lot of people are starting to think about that. And a group of major funders, MacArthur and Knight Foundation, have all got together and pooled their money to try and address this crisis. So that's happening on one hand. Now I'm going to tell you this story about how we got into it, and this will lead to the bridge eventually. So I work at UVM. UVM does not have a journalism program, but there's always been interest in it. And so in 2019, we started something in the summer of 2019 with 5 students, and we thought, let's be super applied. There's a lot of great journalism schools. If you want to go get a journalism degree at Syracuse or whatever, let's just be from the beginning. Let's just be super hands-on with our students, because by the time we were starting this, the media ecosystem didn't exist as it did 20 or 25 years or 50 years ago when other journalism schools were started. So right from the beginning, we wanted to pair our students with newspapers, community newspapers. But we realized that those papers don't have the resources to handle kind of untrained student reporters. It's kind of like if you run a small nonprofit and suddenly we hand you a 20-an-hour-a-week intern, it's like more work than it's worth. And so the realization that we came to was, we, the university, this is good for us, it's good for our students. We need to manage this. We need to put our resources into it. And so we hired a professional editor. And the first editor we hired was a woman named Lisa Scolati, who went on to fame and fortune to start the Waterbury Roundabout. She left us, and then since then we've had a succession of editors. But from the beginning, we realized we can't just, we want our students to, our first mission, of course, is educational. We want our students to have this rich experience, and we want to contribute to local news. But we can't just count on the local news editors because it's just too much work. We'll do the editing in-house. And we'll be in touch with these community papers about what are your needs, what are the stories that you want covered, what would be helpful. And since then, in 2019, the program has grown, and now we have a full-time editor that the university pays for, and we have almost 80 students this semester who are writing and publishing, and it's also multimedia, so video and podcasts, and we're working with about 20 community papers across the state, and then the strongest student work gets on Vermont Public or in VT Digger. And if you're looking closely, you might, we don't say anything, this is not student work, this is professional work, because it's edited and vetted by professionals we hire, but at the bottom of the story you'll see this story was produced in collaboration with the Community News Service at the University of Vermont. So that's the, and then the one other kind of cool thing that happened along the way of doing this was that we looked across the country when we were building it to see who else was doing it. And there are some schools who've been doing this, they call it the teaching hospital model, a long time, most famously the University of Missouri. And there are some others, the University of Florida, the University of Georgia, Boston University. But nobody had sort of taken the effort and said, let's help all of you guys work together. Let's share resources and expertise, and let's see if we can build a network of schools who want to do more of this. And this being these programs where there's a university resources are going in to edit and vet student work that's made available for free to local community media. So, and we found there are programs around the country, and then the Knight Foundation, which is the biggest funder in journalism, the John S. and James L. Knight, you might hear him at the end of the NPR. Anyway, they're like, this is a good idea. We're going to give you $7 million to see if you can really blow this up. And that's what I spend all my time now doing. I've visited about 75 schools to try and help them think about how they can build programs like. So we try and operate on 2 levels. One, test and experiment and grow what we're doing in Vermont. And then 2, is there stuff that we're learning here in Vermont that we can help others do? And some of these are very big journalism schools. They do it at a really high level. But then there's a lot of smaller schools that kind of want to explore how you might do this. Cassandra, do you want to come up and just talk about it and then we'll open it up. But Cassandra will give you the perspective of being a community paper. I should say just one last thing. The attributes of all these programs, bring up a chair or something, are that we're trying to bring it into the curriculum. So these are not, we're not saying to students, do all your coursework and then go get this internship. We're saying part of your class, part of your coursework is to do this work. And we're going to bring university resources. We're going to provide the professional editors, professional reporters who are going to help you be the liaison to the community papers. But we're trying to say we want to take our resources, our UVM resources, and that's why this model is so positive in some way, because there's 6,000 colleges across the country. The infrastructure is built in. Students want to do real things. It's more just sort of turning that ship in that direction. Cassandra is at the bridge. I don't remember when we started partnering with you, a year or 2 ago.
I think, we're in our 2nd year.
A 2nd year. So say what it's like from your perspective. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks, Richard. So many of you are familiar with the bridge. We publish twice a month, and then we also post stories to our website between print issues. We have a small budget and a small staff. A lot of our stories are provided by volunteers. Some of our board members write for publication, and freelance writers. So there's a lot of hustling to get the news covered, and we don't have the resources to cover all the stories we'd like to. So partnering with the Community News Service has just amplified what we're able to offer. Some of that is because we have now been connected with interns. Last year we had 1 intern, Teresa Golub. One of the things that Teresa was able to do that I haven't been able to do is go and hoof it around Montpelier and Barre on town meeting day and talk to people as they exited the polls and write a deeper, more meaningful story about the election results than I would have been able to do by just getting the results at the end of the day and publishing those online. Our interns this year did the same thing. I'm blanking on their names now, Rachel Tramontana and Lucy Reno, and they actually were able to do some research and report what I thought was a detailed and balanced report about Article 13, which was very controversial in Montpelier. It was a non-binding resolution about Israel and Palestine, and they worked really, really hard to get all perspectives in that story. So we were able to offer that. We definitely would not have been able to offer that without them. The other thing is we've had a goal of increasing the number of stories that uplift our community. You know, we have a lot of news to report on, but we also have businesses that should be profiled and people who are interesting. So with the help of our interns, we've been able to offer a little more of that. We've got a really fun story coming out about the Mahjong group in town. They meet at Penzo every Thursday, if you like Mahjong. And there's a wonderful middle school kid, Abe Rosenberg, who you might have seen on the street corner. We're going to have Pete holding up a sign urging drivers to walk instead of drive. So we're going to have a profile of Abe. These are the kinds of things that we would love to do, and maybe we could figure out how to do them without our interns, but with them it just makes the whole thing easier. But the piece that Richard talked about that's huge is that they do all the editing. So I'm not training interns, which I have done, and it is way more time than I have to give. I'm getting clean copy that's been edited by their editor. I get to the fun part. I get to talk to the interns and brainstorm ideas and help them with ideas for the angles of the stories, and here's the people you should interview, and And then I can't help myself, I also edit it after it comes in, but I'm trying to back off on that a little bit so they can have their stories be what they produce with their editor. It's hard to convey what a big deal that is for us, for a small news organization, to get quality, professional, clean copy. I don't get that from adult freelancers oftentimes, so that's really, they're adults, I shouldn't say, I apologize, they're adults. But that's one of the benefits, but there's other things that we have definitely appreciated working with, not just the internship partnership, but CNS Community News Service puts on an annual journalism conference that, it's okay if I talk about that? Good. I have gone to journalism conferences, and this is not like the ones that I used to go to. The atmosphere is collaborative in a way that I don't remember the news being 20, 30 years ago. Not that, it's not that news organizations weren't collaborative, but we're all in it in a really scary time right now. And my sense is the Community News Service has been gathering us so we can collectively address this problem. And I'm sure you have some stories to tell about what's come out of that, but I know CNS is doing policy work that will benefit the Bridge and other newspapers around a bill that's going through the legislature right now that would apply the state dollars that are already being spent on advertising to Vermont organizations instead of the big tech companies, or maybe in addition to, but anyway, I won't go to all the details, I'll leave that to you if you're gonna talk about the bill. But that's in large part thanks to the CNS having the resources to work with the journalists who are, in the State House and making that happen. I have this long list of the other things.
Do students pitch stories to you, or are you pitching stories more to them?
It's a combo. So like when this year we started, I got 2 interns instead of 1, which was great. And what they do is they have 5 stories they're gonna write per semester, and they like to come up with different types of stories. So they'll send me their list, we wanna do this, a feature, a profile, whatever. And then I figure out what stories we have going on, I talk to them, I learn a little bit about their interests so that I can, like this, one of our interns, Rachel, is really interested in social justice, so she's gonna be writing a story about migrant workers that I don't know when it'll be coming, but in the next month or so, I hope. And so that's partly how it works. It's a little bit different than how usually, we have an editorial meeting, we figure out what's going on, and then I assign the stories. And then, or people send me ideas. This is more based around their requirements for what they have to accomplish. And then I know with 2 interns, I'm gonna have 10 stories in the next 3 months. I've learned not to worry about the deadlines with them too, because they're college students. So I just make sure that whatever I do assign them is not time sensitive. I think that covers it. I feel like I'm hogging the mic now.
No.
I have a list of.
Let's see what questions people have.
So you mentioned not needing to edit the stories, which is a big benefit. But when you talk stories, do you talk about, well, I need 5,000 words on this or 2,000 words? So you give them a fairly tightly packaged.
Yes, except it would be like 500.
Yeah, okay, I'm
I'm thinking New Yorker.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, exactly.
These are great pieces.
Yeah, I'll give them a generic word count, not generic, but a general,
yeah.
Obviously plus or minus a couple hundred or 100 words is fine. And then I usually ask them to be on the lookout for photo ideas so we can, work with our folks, like someone right here who takes photos for the Bridge, or maybe they can get photos, or that's one of the considerations. Because even if we can run it in the newspaper without photos, we're always thinking about what's it gonna look like on the website. I did want to mention one other thing that you didn't mention, which is the Community News Service has a website where they publish all their interns' work, and any news outlet can republish it. So not only are we getting the stories from our interns, but I troll through that news site. I do, yes. because you have intern in Waterbury, and that's within our scope, and we just don't have the capacity to cover Waterbury the way we'd like to. We also don't want to directly compete with Lisa Scaglietti at the Waterbury Roundabout, but I think this is her intern, probably. So we just posted on our website a really cool story about the Waterbury post offices. I don't know if you knew, but they have two different post offices and very different prices for boxes there. There was one student, I'm not sure whose intern that student is, but he wrote about the Green Mountain Druid School in Worcester. Another, it's hard for us to get to Worcester, but they're in our coverage area. Seemed like an important local story, so we were able to offer that on our website. So it's a really big deal for local news.
So, and to Cassandra's point, it's exactly how it's supposed to work. There's some interaction. Is that still on? There's some interaction with the editor. And then ideally, the students are coming to these places and starting. Most of our students at UVM aren't from Vermont. So to have them come and spend some time here is just amazing. Double dip. Yeah. Questions or comments or thoughts for anybody?
How much is on your website compared to what you publish in the paper?
So on our website are all the stories that are published with all our partners. So that's Community News Service.
We publish everything that goes into print. If you pick up the Bridge and read the newspaper, that's all on the website, and then there's added stories that show up on the website that don't make it to print. Either they're timely and they need to be published immediately, or they're just stories that we were able to cover but didn't have space in the actual print newspaper. So it's almost like we have two related but separate outlets.
You tease all of those with email, right?
Yes, yeah, oh, please do sign up for our newsletter, by the way. There's a box right on our website. We push out all the stories in our email newsletter, I think twice a week. And we don't share names or do anything else with people's email addresses.
So I get that, so that would have things that are on your website?
Yes.
Okay. I've been thinking, I've missed all these things, but I haven't.
Yeah, sometimes we don't all get every single thing on the website pushed out in the newsletter, but we try to.
And the Bridge is the exact example of what's happening in local news. Multiple funding streams, right? And utilizing the resources of the community. So you have reporters from like in this room, you have a photographer?
John Lazenby, board
John,
member
yeah.
and photographer. And Nancy Reed next to him is the chair of our board, and right behind Nancy and John is Paul Gamble, who's our managing director. And
Amazing.
actually, I don't want to know how much plugging I can do here. So.
And you're organized as a 501c3, so you can
Yeah.
accept. So that's the other thing that's starting to happen. Vermont Public, as these new nonprofits grow up, it provides alternate funding models. Yeah. And that's how we see what we're doing. We're not going to ever solve the local news problem, but we're one part of the solution. Universities, as we should, stepping up. It's first and foremost, our mission is for our students, and this is really good for our students. And secondly, if we can contribute to local news, it's a double, yeah. Norm, who I used to work with back at the department, 120, state.
That was a while ago.
Wait, did you come in much? I think you were always off inventing something.
Yeah, when I was out doing other things too, but yeah. But when you say on your website you've got all the articles from all your partners,
Yeah.
is that nationally or just Vermont?
Just Vermont.
Just Vermont.
And then we have been, on this other thing that we're doing, trying to help more universities do this, we do have a national site which showcases some of the best stories, but it's really more, it's not so much a place where you would go get stories, it's just you would see what's being produced by other schools. So it is. But for Vermont, all the stories that once in a while a partner has a story that's exclusive to them. They did all the sort of, here's what you should do. Then it would go first to them. I don't know if this has happened with you ever, Cassandra. And then we wouldn't post it until you said, okay.
Might have been once that happened.
Yeah.
Do you work with any of the daily papers?
We definitely make all our content available to the dailies and the Times-Argus. It's a little different in that we're not good at deadlines. You heard Cassandra say.
What about Digger
And
the model?
yeah, so again, the strongest student stories, like maybe this post office story was on Digger, I don't know. But the strongest student stories you will see on Digger, or a story that's a very featurey story, or sometimes over the weekend when they need content, they'll take one of our stories. But one of the things about bigger journalism programs differently, but we're not good at deadlines. We've told our students they have to do 5 stories, but things happen. So they're meant to be the types of stories that Cassandra would really like to cover, but may not get to.
Yeah. Could you talk about print versus like electronic, such as the Vermont Digger model, versus having, we're all used to getting our Montpelier Bridge at the co-op or wherever, and some of us maybe read it online, but I'll bet a lot of us don't.
How do you think of that?
Of the,
Being like you have your online site and then you have the actual physical copy you're printing.
yeah, should I,
Yeah. Is it still working? It seems
is this working? Oh, can you hear me without it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That is something that we're constantly struggling with, the digital and print, because the print newspaper is the heart and soul of what we do. It's what everybody wants and is used to, and it's mailed at no cost. Can't read my print. No cost to everybody. Oh, that's what that was. Is this working? Oh, that's better. I don't know who was funny, if it was Ann or, okay. Yeah, so, the website requires a different kind of management. It requires regular posting. Otherwise, you get lost in whatever the secret algorithm is, and that's constantly changing. But we don't get the kind of traffic of, even 7 Days or Digger or, huge newspapers, so. This go out again.
I know how to replace the batteries, so I can go down and get those.
All right, I'll just project. So I guess the short answer is we're constantly thinking about the relationship between print and our website and trying to provide value on both. Yeah, I'm not sure how much deeper to go into that.
And I, like most of you, love a print product, right? There's nothing like being able, and also, you probably know this, but print gives you the ability to see stories that you wouldn't choose or the algorithm wouldn't send to you. So I remember as a kid, I grew up in Vermont, I always wanted to get the Red Sox scores, but I ended up reading this other things, right? And that's something that people don't have that same access to. So I hope print never goes away, but it is expensive. And there are the delivery issues. And the Postal Service, which is how we've been doing it, isn't working as well as it once did.
Yeah, and they don't refund you if they don't deliver your.
And most people get their news now from their feeds. So you have to meet that moment. And for us, working with students, we also have to be much better, and we haven't quite nailed this, at actually producing news that students are consuming.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm a long-time subscriber to the Harvard Gazette, which, as you probably know, is now gone online, is a nonprofit, is doing citizen journalism, citizen photography. I'm pretty sure I've seen some
Yes, we have
other
that,
people. Yeah, okay. So it was more a comment, but also just another paper that is very small town, has been around for a century now.
Yes.
And I think without having gone online and sort of changed their model and getting the support that they're getting from your organization, I don't think they would have made it. And right now, the editor is basically free of charge, and they're struggling, but it's really integral for that community.
It's so important. Yeah.
One thing that they do is kind of a hybrid in that it's not just story, story, story. in some sort of sequence. They publish it as a whole paper, so you can, if you've got a big enough monitor, you can put the whole paper
Yeah,
up there.
it is a paper.
Like a PDF, and then
Yeah,
you flip through it.
And you can go through it.
They have a, I'm sorry, Mike.
And the Washington Post, you can read the Post the same way, as a paginated thing.
So they offer in two ways, though. It's really, really
Which
interesting.
seems really time consuming.
One is a paper, is a PDF, and you just scroll through it. The other is, I think they call it a flip page. And so you click right side or left side, and you hear it goes click, and it flips the page for you as if you're turning a page in a newspaper. It's auditorially pleasing, but it's, don't stay if you don't want us to hear. But it's auditorially pleasing, but I don't find it as easy to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because they publish online the way they do, they can be a much bigger paper because they don't have to print it all out. So it used to be a quick read, now it takes an hour to get through it.
Yeah, it's like doubled in
Lot
size.
more big.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I wanted to comment on the Harvard Gazette?
It's coming through the speakers, but
I don't know what's
Is
happening.
she out there maybe practicing?
She's testing it.
Just to your point about the editor not getting paid, I know of at least 3 editors in Vermont right now who aren't getting paid. And I think we should all be really alarmed because that's not gonna last.
yeah.
It includes the Waterbury Roundabout, your former editor for CNS. I just met another editor, I think he's in, I don't wanna say Brandon, or, I don't know how many besides the ones that I personally met exist. But I think that's why the bill that CNS was instrumental in getting put in before the legislature is so important to redirect Vermont ad dollars to not just small news organizations, but Vermont media in general. The advertising dollars are still very important to small newspapers, but even the nonprofits. Because for us, we're a nonprofit, we are now able to, we had a system in place beforehand, but our individual donations have really increased since we got our own nonprofit status. And we're eligible for grants, but advertising revenue is still our biggest revenue source, and I'm gonna guess for the Hardwick Gazette, that may be the case too. I just wanna plug.
And I'll just say, it is a little bit reframing, which I'm sure this audience is friendly to, that local news is a public good. And we've taken it for granted that it's free because advertising has propped it up. But in other countries in the world, news is subsidized by the government, and we do it here at the national level with NPR and PBS. But for the time being. But local news, authentic, trustworthy, legitimate local news is a public good. And this bill that Cassandra mentioned, which is going to be voted on by the House today, possibly, would take a certain percent of the funds that state agencies allocate for advertising, with some exemptions like tourists, travel and tourism, and make sure that they're spending that on local organizations, not just on Google and Facebook. Other places around the country are doing things like that in state action. In New York, they approved legislation that provided $25 million as a way, and I think it had to do with the tax exempt. So if you have workers and you pay taxes for your workers, you got some kind of exemption if you're a local news. California has done something, Washington State has done something. And that's another thing that we really want to support, is like thinking about this as a public good and appropriating funding to support it. Yeah.
Don't you worry about public good? Yes, I agree, but with public money, there's the risk of public control.
Yeah, no, it always comes up. But again, we've been doing it with NPR for a long, long time. And we, in the publishing business, have these sharp lines between the business side and the editorial side.
Isn't it true that NPR gets very little actual public money?
I think the total for CPB is something like 450 million. I don't know how much of that is NPR, maybe 100, I don't know.
I heard today the
said they get 1% of the money from.
Of their total budget?
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
40 million, maybe, yeah. But yeah,
What the concern was,
Control.
public control, is that what you
Yeah,
said?
Yeah.
but
Do we risk dictation of what the news is going to consist of with that public money?
I just don't think so, like.
On the other hand, you have the Washington Post, who is owned by
Yeah, I know.
he who shall not be named, who is now interfering on the editorial side of the wall. And so private money has just as many
Sure.
problems with it as well, when it's a large enough.
We have a long history of yellow journalism in this country, no doubt about it, yes.
I would say too that we are always, it comes up, I wouldn't say all the time, but occasionally, whether it's advertising dollars from a local business or, we don't really, this doesn't happen to us, but we get donations from individuals. Presumably, the advertisers and the donors understand that their financial contribution to the bridge does not affect our editorial coverage, but newspapers are wrangling with that all the time. So you have a good point. To me, it feels like familiar territory in a sense.
Ms.
Yes.
Roman has had her hand up.
Do colleges and universities not have newspapers like they used to tens of years ago?
So there's student media, you know, and student media, kind of like legacy media is, there's less of it than there once was. But a college will still have a student paper often. UVM has the Cynic. The difference here is that student media is independent, and students work under this thing called no prior review. There's this fierce independence, which is great, but it doesn't really work for the Cassandras of the world, because then there's no professional editor who's in between the student's work and the bridge. So student media has an important role to fill, and like at UVM, for example, they cover the university. They're probably one of the last people who cover the university, which needs to be covered. We don't, because that would be a conflict of interest for us. Yeah. But yes, student media is out there. It just has this kind of, and it tends to be more university focused, whereas what we're trying to do is steer more coverage to support local communities. Yeah. Oh, yes, sir.
A comment really, having grown up from a very early age, trained by my parents to be an avid newspaper reader, actually in 2 languages. I'm impressed by the quality of the work that these interns do in the sources that I read, and I assume elsewhere in the state. Having just moved to Montpelier, but having lived in Worcester for many, many years, I mostly was following the Montpelier-based papers, but also having served in the legislature representing a very bizarre district, it forced me to also read the Hardwick Gazette, because Woodbury was in my district, and the Morrisville News and Citizen, and then the Stowe Reporter. So I'm still getting those papers, even though I don't have to anymore. And so in following the stories that I would read done by the interns, I have been really, really impressed by the quality and the depth of the work they do. I am critical of news reporting, because I'm always grumbling about, in stories I know something about, what did they leave out, they got something wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And I just want to say that the interns do as good a job, and it's not any, I don't grumble anymore about the work they do. I think it's really great work, and based on what you told us earlier, the fact that most of them are not from Vermont makes me think about what are they learning, not just about the work of writing, of journalism, but also about this place.
Yeah. No, so agree. I mean, that's, again, it's really first and foremost for us and the students to go experience some of this. I think your point, though, is excellent, and that's why this is never the whole solution. You really need that beat reporter, that person who's lived here and covered the community for a while, develop the sources, you know, to stay on the story. That's one of the things I miss when the media was more robust. You'd cover that same story. What happened at the, you know? And our students are never going to be very good at that. Yeah. Others or other comments? Yeah. Or thoughts about this? What do you read the Gazette, the Hardwick Gazette? Does anybody else read other community papers? Or
I read the Gazette.
you do?
The News and Citizen, all the Northeast Kingdom
Yeah.
papers.
The Barton Chronicle is actually worker-owned, and that's been kind of hung in there pretty well. The Caledonia Record is still family-owned.
White River Herald, Richard?
Yeah, the White River Herald. That's a really fabulous paper that that guy Tim Calabro is the editor of. Yeah.
You do wonder though, like, I've been a subscriber to the Times-Argus for I don't know how many years, I don't even want to say, but it's gotten thinner, we're getting less
Yes.
local stories.
Yes.
We're getting national news a day or two later, it's only coming out 5 days a week now. So, you know, I can't imagine at some point it's not gonna go down.
No, they're really, it's remarkable what you're doing, Cassandra, and your bridge folks. But yeah, the trajectory is like this. Every day, every week, we lose 2 community newspapers in this country.
You mentioned about mail, I mean, I got a Times-Argus until they stopped delivering. I mean, there's been delivery problems with that to Montpelier for
Yeah.
a decade, or more. And News and Citizen only just, the last issue announced that they're not mailing anymore. So you have to pick them up at the store, or you can pay for a subscription, because it's been free.
Yeah.
I think I heard you say earlier something about one of your goals being to bring the local papers, connect them to each other.
Yeah.
And could you talk a little bit more about that? How you put those mechanisms in place?
Right.
Yes, because I'm here with a hopeful message. Because yes, everything is not going the right way, but there are some things that we're doing here in Vermont that are unique, and there are some. And one of them is, as Cassandra said, we have been bringing together all the journalists in Vermont, and there was this kind of pent-up need to do that. It hadn't been happening, but come for a full day. We got this beautiful space at UVM, and just kind of talk. And out of that has come some ideas about collaboration. It used to be the businesses were way more competitive. You know, the Rutland Herald competed with the Burlington Free Press. But now, it's much more like, how can we all work together? And the areas are not really in competition, right? You wouldn't really, I mean, maybe a little bit, but. So, are there resources that we can share across all platforms? Is there some kind of shared legal services that we could help support? Or is there, these are all things we're just starting to think about. And the next conference is in June 13th, and we're hoping to roll some of those out. Another positive thing that's happened for Vermont is that we have become what's called a Press Forward chapter. And Press Forward is this group of philanthropists who have pooled all their money, and then you can apply to be a chapter. And every chapter gets $250,000 from this fund. And the chapter itself is supposed to go out and raise more money. And they're usually hosted by community foundations. So in Vermont, it's hosted by the Vermont Community Foundation. And what it's meant now is that the Vermont Community Foundation now sees this as one of their principal initiatives. And you'll hear more about that in the next couple of months. But Press Forward is meant to uplift the media ecosystems. And we haven't quite figured out, or Press Forward hasn't figured out, what are the shared services or what are the ways that we might support the media ecosystem. You probably have ideas of things that might be helpful.
Yeah, I would love it if we could find a way to have work together to set up an account with a printer and get better prices for those of us who are still printing, like a collective style. I don't know exactly how that would work, because we're all different, we're all over the state, but there isn't, there's only a couple printers around.
Yeah, the artist is going to Canada, right?
Yeah, we go to, there's a number of us who all come out on Wednesday that, that print with Quebecor in Canada. And they've been great, but we don't know what's happening now with
Yeah, with
tariffs.
tariffs, yeah.
We haven't heard anything from them, we've asked. But we're always kind of checking around to see if there are any other options that might be, so far they're the best price around, but
Where does the World publish?
I believe they're also at Quebecor.
I thought they were in New Hampshire for a
Oh,
while.
are they? I might be misspeaking, I guess I should say, I don't know. I'm pretty sure 7 Days is publishing with Quebecor. The ones, if you notice a lot of the small, or the weeklies or bi-weeklies coming out on Wednesdays, it's because that's when they do their deliveries. So, yeah.
So naive, so they get sent electronically, they print, and then they get shipped out.
Yep, yep. We used to have this giant, like, 18-wheeler show up at our doorstep. Well, we still do. Paul's there every Wednesday, or every other Wednesday, is this massive Mack truck that takes up the entire, up on the old VCFA campus, right across the little ridge street from College Hall, and then they open the back of the truck, and there's one pallet with our newspapers on it. I think we're probably last on their really hoping.
Norm, will you take a picture of Cassandra and I? Okay, while we talk. Keep going. Other questions or thoughts or comments?
A question about the students.
Whoops, yes.
So how long has the program been going now? I'm not sure.
We started in 2019, and then it's grown since.
So if any of the students stayed in the state?
Yes, such a great question. Because that's what you want. I don't know if you've hired any, but no.
If we could hire a reporter, I'd be thrilled to.
Yes. We have TV is still somewhat more profitable. We have a couple at TV. We have one at Vermont Public. But we also have, 10 or 12 who are in the news business in other rural places or more rural places. It used to be when you went to journalism school, it was all about getting a job at the New York Times. But now these programs and us are trying to say, get a job in the community journalism, It's, some of these students are drawn to go to Portland, Oregon, but some students are, we have a student in Maine, in upper Maine. Yeah, no, it's a great question. We need to do better tracking it and seeing, yeah. There's a lot of entry-level jobs in journalism, believe it or not, around the country. It's the medium and the upper level, so.
Yeah. I wanted to, on my long list here of the things, I put together my list of all the great things that have been helpful for us through CNS. One of the things I noted was that we get to be a part of training new journalists. It's exciting. For me, it's really exciting they're excited. I'm trying to capture what I'm trying to say. Even if they don't go on and become professional journalists, it feels really important to me for the young people in colleges, universities, and high schools to understand how journalism works, to know how to be discerning, and even to know when their language is being biased or not. I mean, there's a lot of really subtle language cues that, I don't know how often this comes up at UVM, but when I've worked with other interns, I'm trying to think of an example. Some of it is even referring, this is my pet peeve, if you refer to a corporation or an organization as they, say, corporations are not humans despite whatever the law says. So I don't refer to them with pronouns for people, they're always it. But that's a cultural thought that conveys a subtle bias. And I'm on my soapbox now,
But actually, that's core to our program, by the way. We don't think of it as training students to be journalists. It's a little lofty. We think of training them to be citizens in democracy. because most of them aren't going to go on to be journalists. It's the classic liberal arts thing, but they're going to be better writers, thinkers, and they're also going to maybe understand more of these important institutions that, yeah. So thank you for thinking of it that way too, you know?
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and just helping them get better at doing these things, then they'll go on maybe and appreciate journalism a little more, yeah.
Are you running into any intimidation attempts from the new administration?
Our programs around the country that I'm in touch with, absolutely. You know, it's terrifying. You know, we work with folks in Florida, in Texas, and there's like all sorts of laws coming at, because media is obviously one of the things in the bullseye. In Vermont, not that I know of. We do have this, let's see what you think of this, but public officials, for some reason, don't feel quite as accountable, even in Vermont, as they once did. They're harder to get a hold of. They're harder to get to respond. I don't know if you agree with that, or maybe not here, but.
It depends. We have found that a little bit more with certain institutions, not so much with the city. The city in Montpelier has been great, and Barry has been great too. Our legislators have been very accessible to us. The school, not so much. I would say too, to your question, we haven't experienced at the bridge direct pushback, but I am seeing an uptick in what appears to be bot-generated or extremely negative and bullying types of comments on our social media posts, where we'll just post a story and the comments are not indicative of the community that I've been around. And I've found myself having to go through and block those accounts and get them off our social media because they're so upsetting. So seeing a little bit more of that. We're so small that our little bit more might be just not even noticeable on a larger news organization.
Yeah, like Vermont Digger stopped having
Yeah.
comments, right, for readers, but when they post an article on Facebook, whoa.
Yeah, people just let loose. One thing we are seeing an uptick of is that more and more people writing who want to offer letters or opinions and want to be anonymous. We have, you know, we don't allow that. We require people to provide their name, and we're actually just like getting that more clear in writing right now. But in most of those cases, it was because the people didn't feel safe because of their identity, for whatever, you know, reason, or just because they were writing about a topic that they felt that could endanger them because there's so much doxing in the world. So that's kind of a sad thing we're seeing more of. I don't know if other news organizations are.
Oh, probably. Ms. Skinner, final question or comment?
Sorry for being late, Richard. Are you affected at all by all these federal cutbacks? I mean, does your program get any federal money?
No.
So it's all from the state and university?
It's actually all, in our case, our big funders are philanthropy. It's contributions.
So you don't get any money from UVM?
We do get money from UVM, but it would probably be what they would consider the general fund. So they pay, and that's one of the things about this model, by the way, that's, to me, it's so important to get more universities to participate. Students pay tuition, that pays for a faculty member, that faculty member teaches the class. That class could be contributing to local news. UVM has a huge other problem, almost, I think they said $800,000 a day in federal money, but that's like a different part than me. Yeah.
From me, I mean, you're a little nest there somewhere.
Well, me being on the general fund tuition side of the university, you know, so, because we're on the, and that's the other thing we keep saying, bring this into the curriculum. These should be part of your academic experience. Part of what you get when you go to schools, you can have experiences like this, access to editors, and you can also get your work published.
But you have a new president, so maybe you can have that conversation.
Yes. No, and all sorts of things. Higher ed is so much in the bullseye here, so. I don't know what's coming, but we do live in a state where it feels like there's legislative support for what we do, right? Yeah. Yeah. And the charitable organizations, to their credit, so we're talking MacArthur and Knight, two giant entities, have both written all of their grantees, us, saying, we are behind you guys, we are not going anywhere. In fact, we're going to put more money into this. Now, they may be next on the target list. But the heads of those organizations have made these really clear statements.
What do they give to you now?
For us, we have $7 million over 5 years from those two. Yeah. Yeah. But mostly that's to do the national work. And then the Vermont work is funded through other sources and by just the students being in classes. Cassandra calls them interns, and they are interns, but they're in classes, and that's how we manage them.
Should I call them something else?
No, interns, but whatever works for you. But they're registered for a course. So in the old days, you might think of an intern as somebody that came, right? Yeah, yeah.
So they actually register for like the courses like news writing or whatever?
They're in a class, and one of our, I think yours are Scott Finn's class.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott Finn, who you may know from Vermont Public Days, now teaches this class and edits the student work. Scott, early in his career, before he was Vermont Public CEO, was a reporter, and he kind of loves getting back to some of it.
How many classes do you teach?
I think we have 4 or 5. I don't teach them, but we have 4 or 5 of these classes where we're producing content for partners. We have one just doing audio now. Anyway, thank you all, and thank you for supporting the Bridge and your local media. I know